And welcome back. We're just 12 days out from the Iowa Republican caucus, and there's plenty of politics to dig into, so let's get right to our panel here. Joining me now on set is Idrees Kahloon, Washington bureau chief for The Economist, María Teresa Kumar, president and CEO of Voto Latino, and an NBC News political analyst, and Sara Fagen, former White House political director under President George W. Bush. Thank you all so much for joining us here on Meet the Press Now. And Idrees, I want to start with you. We just played a large chunk of our interview with Vivek Ramaswamy. A lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
What stuck out to you?
Well, he's the same. He's combative. He's hyper-intelligent, hyper-fluent, but he's dipped in the polls, right? And you see that he has carved out this role for himself as a defender of Donald Trump, both and an antagonist of the media. He says that he's not going to run in any of the states that have removed Trump from the ballot. He seems at this point, and Dasha mentioned his poll numbers, you know, in the single digits in Iowa. It seems like he's staying in the race not to be president, although he says that's what he wants to be, but perhaps that he's auditioning to be vice president for Donald Trump.
So he might not be heading to the nomination, at least according to those polls, but is this where the party is heading?
This is the direction of travel from the party. I mean, Sara, you worked in the Bush White House, right? You know, how different are these Republicans from what you see now? But he has energy. He has people who come to his rallies and people who maybe are going to vote for Trump over him. But that is where the party is headed. It is this style of rhetoric.
And Sara, I want to ask you that question. Is this where the party is heading? You, of course, worked for former President George W. Bush. Is this where the party is heading?
Well, I think certainly a segment of the party has been heading that way and is heading more strongly. And you see Vivek, he captures some of the kind of intellectual Silicon Valley right who are fans of him, as well as a lot of younger kind of Republican men. And it's an interesting coalition that sort of he crafts with that style. And a lot of that is style. That is intentional. That combative approach is intentional because it speaks to a rigged system, which is what they believe.
And what'd you make of his comment that Donald Trump was wounded? That was perhaps one of the only criticisms that we've heard him level against the former president. What'd you make of that?
Well, he's got to do something to try to peel off some of that Trump support. And, you know, that's the theory that says we like him, we think he was a good president, but he just has too much noise around him, and so it's time for somebody who doesn't have that noise surrounding their candidacy. I think that's a weak argument. It's not going to pull anyone off of Donald Trump.
All right, I want to switch to María Teresa Kumar. It's looking quite likely, of course, that Donald Trump is going to run away with the win in Iowa. But I want to play you something that Ron DeSantis said yesterday about exceeding expectations, about the expectations game. Let's take a listen.
Do you think Iowa, for you, is it your deciding factor?
No, this is a race to get the majority of the delegates. You know, we've done Iowa the way people who have done well in Iowa have done, which is be on the ground, create the organization. The polling has never predicted how the results come out because it's a caucus and it's just a different beast.
María, what a difference a few months makes. You know, just a few months ago, I was talking to sources within the DeSantis campaign, basically saying that Iowa was everything, that they were putting all their eggs in the Iowa basket. And now, you know, he's walking away from that. What do you make of that argument? If not Iowa for Ron DeSantis, what?
Well, this is a candidate that was absolutely the one that was going to take Donald Trump down. He was Donald Trump light. And then he had to relaunch a campaign that folks felt that he never launched. He's lost his fizz. And as a result, I think the Republicans are now trying to coalesce around Nikki Haley. It's one of the reasons why we saw Vivek try to say, no, I'm actually the new Donald Trump. In fact, I agree with you. I think he's trying to run for vice president. And he's trying to be the foil, saying we are not white nationalists, when, in fact, everything that the former president, twice impeached, has demonstrated that he does embrace it. And so I think for DeSantis is that his campaign turned out to be dead on arrival, even though he had the largest purse of donations outside of Donald Trump. And I find that really quite surprising because he wasn't able to demonstrate what would make him different.
And Idrees, I want to turn to you on that point. On the point of the expectations game, what does a successful Iowa caucus look like for non-Trump candidates, whether it be DeSantis, whether it be Nikki Haley? How can they come out of there claiming some sort of victory? What threshold do they need to meet?
Look, the polls at the moment suggest that Donald Trump could get as much as 50% of Iowa. I think that if they manage to hold him to something less than that, that's some amount of encouragement. DeSantis, as you point out, has staked a lot on Iowa. He's done the full Grassley. He's gone all 99 counties, and the
endorsement of the governor.
And the endorsement of the governor. And in New Hampshire, the governor there has endorsed Nikki Haley, who's been all of her campaign on that state as well. I think that you'll see, likeliest Donald Trump runs away with both of those states, and at that point, the campaign is effectively done.
But is a second place in Iowa a moral victory? I mean, what does it signify? If Nikki Haley reaches a certain threshold and perhaps keeps Donald Trump under 50%, does she have a lot of juice heading into New Hampshire?
You have some momentum effect, but, if you end up consolidating, Trump against any single person head-to-head, still, according to the polls, suggests that Trump walks away with that. And losing by 30 as opposed to, coming in the single digits, it's small consolation, but you still don't get to be president.
Whatever you can get. All right, Sara, I want to turn to you. Donald Trump locked up endorsements from the rest of House leadership today with the backing of Tom Emmer. I want to read from his statement. He said that Democrats have made clear that they will use every tool in their arsenal to try and keep Joe Biden and his failed policies in power, and we cannot let them. It's time for Republicans to unite behind our party's clear frontrunner, which is why I am proud to endorse Donald J. Trump for president. Still, not the biggest endorsement, of course. Emmer has a history with Donald Trump. What do you make of that endorsement?
I make that Tom Emmer hasn't given up on being Speaker of the House of Representatives. Yes. I mean,
is it an acknowledgement of reality?
It's an acknowledgement of reality, which is that it'd be very difficult to lead a party organization, be in a party leadership position or the top position, and not have the support of the former president. Whether he wins the nomination or not, he's still going to be a major figure in the party. And
exactly to that point, does this show really the power that Donald Trump has over the Republican Party in Congress right now?
Well, he's the former president, so he is the most senior Republican, most recent elected person. So yes, definitionally, he has a lot of power on the party, and he is, as we've talked about, well ahead in the polls and likely to be the nominee based on what we know today. So yes, he has a lot of power over the party.
But I would actually kind of argue that Donald Trump, for all intents and purposes, is also an incumbent president. Mm-hmm. And the fact that he is not sweeping the Republican nomination also speaks to this vacuum. Well, he's not yet, right? Like
he's pretty far ahead.
No, he's far ahead, but it's part of because people haven't consolidated. I think if there was a candidate that folks were able to consolidate against, I think that he should be polling. I mean, everybody talks about how low Biden is, but Donald Trump is not exactly that far ahead either.
I don't know if I buy that. His poll numbers are pretty high, but you're right. If there was some consolidation, but that has not happened yet. I do want to turn quickly, though, as we begin to run out of time here. I want to turn to the Democratic side. We just learned that President Biden will be giving a speech on Saturday near Valley Forge, and he's expected to talk about threats to democracy. It's a theme that his campaign is really leaning into right here. Is that straight from the 2020 playbook, and is that really the best option right now for the Biden-Harris campaign to attract these Democratic voters?
I think that he needs to continue sending the alarm of that the person that is leading right now the Republican Party does not believe in the Republic. And by reminding the American people of that, it was one of the reasons why the red wave never came to fruition. Mm-hmm. You had plenty of Republicans and independent men who had voted historically Republican that decided either to stand it out or vote Democratic on the Democratic side in the midterms, because they recognize that we are living under, I hate to say this, I'm the optimist in the room, mostly existential threat. Right. It is real. And so I think what he's trying to use this as a moment of saying, look, we have to stay the course. And this idea that the Biden administration hasn't done anything for the American people is pretty bogus. I think what we're going to be able to see in the next 15 years from now, what we're going to say is...
Will that message about threats to democracy, will it resonate?
I think it has. No, but it has. I mean, I think it has. That's one of the reasons why you saw so many... And it was so connected to how they gutted Roe versus Wade. That was the beginning of the erosion of not only democracy, but our rights. And it's one of the reasons why you had so many, again, independent Republican men say, you know what, I can't do this to the country. Do I love Joe Biden? No. But do I believe in democracy and our institutions? Absolutely.
Sara, I want to give you one quick point, and then I want to end with Idrees.
I think it's certainly a great message for the Democratic base. I don't think it riles up other members. And to your point about the Biden accomplishments, if Biden was trying to appeal to independents, he should be talking about his accomplishments, but he's not. He's talking about this instead. And I think that tells
you... It's an anniversary.
I think that this tells you a lot about what he's going to campaign on and what he's not going to campaign on.
And Idrees, finally, really quickly, President Biden also giving a speech in Charleston, South Carolina on Monday. Is that part of the effort by the Biden-Harris campaign to attract and to retain black voters?
Well, they were asked about this, and they said, no, it's about, the soul of the nation, all these other themes that they're trying to sound. But, I think that most voters have heard of January 6th. They know about the trials, and yet, in the polls, Donald Trump is leading Biden by a few points. So, the democracy versus autocracy point is an effective one for the base, but I don't think that it might have the pull that the campaign thinks that it does.
Idrees, María, Teresa, and Sara, thank you all so much for joining us here on the panel on Meet the Press Now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.